So in my last video, I was kind of talking about how my mother sort of isolated my father from his sisters and kind of, I think in a way, kind of forbid him from seeing them. And I also started to talk about, I didn't go too far into it, but my elementary school days where I think my mother actually sabotaged a lot of my friendships. Or, potential friendships or just relationships with my peers in general. And I said I'd talk more about that. So, when I was in primary school, like second or third grade, my mom got a job teaching in the school that I was attending. And she was a reading specialist, so she didn't teach one particular grade. She taught a few kids from each grade. So when she started working in primary school, it's one thing because it's like, oh, cool, your mom's a teacher. Oh, yeah, that's so cool. Whatever. Oh, I have your mom. She's my teacher. So if I had, if when I moved on to a different school, if she had stayed with the second or third grade, that probably really wouldn't have been bad. But then the next school in that district had fourth through sixth grade. So I start, I'm going into fourth grade that summer, and my mom tells me that I don't know who they is, the principal or whoever, changed her schedule. So now she's going to be teaching at both schools. Remember, she was a reading specialist, so she wasn't assigned to a particular grade. She could have taught any grade in the district. So now she's teaching the primary school, and I move up to the next school. She's going to be in my school again. And then in middle school, the school was fourth through sixth grade, and then when I moved up to the middle school, they put the sixth graders in the middle school. So then I'm moving up to sixth grade. All by coincidence, her schedule changes again. And now she teaches sixth grade in my new school. So, as a kid, I didn't really question it. I just thought it was a big coincidence. Oh yeah, they changed their schedule. They need an extra reading teacher. They need, I didn't question it. But then, recently I don't remember the conversation, but I called her out and I was like, Ma, was that really all coincidence and just the principal on a whim? Was that really like what happened? She actually admitted, she said she was worried about me and that I couldn't cope with the school environment emotionally and that I was going to have trouble in school because my father was such a monster. It makes absolutely no sense. He's like, she's like, oh, I was so worried because your father was an alcoholic. So, my school, the one place where he wasn't, and the one place where he probably was never going to show up, that just wasn't his style to come up to the school and call his job, that just was not him. She's got to be breathing down my back every second. The one place where he would never show up doesn't make any sense. And she said, she was so worried that I couldn't cope emotionally, because I guess I was so quiet and fragile anyway that I needed her to kind of, oversee everything that happened and protect me from my big bad monster of a father who had no intention of going within a mile of the school anyway. So, you think that's bad, but in a sick way, it's like I think she was like the popular mean girl in high school, and I think in a way she wanted to relive her childhood because by working there and teaching a few people in my grade, she got to know a lot about my class and my schoolmates and kind of developed her own opinion on each of them as children, like which one, who the smart ones are, who those all around perfect kids are, they're smart, they're popular, they're this, they're that, and then who the lowlifes were, the bad seeds, or who came from white trash, or who, so she's establishing in my whole grade, who to aspire to and who's garbage, and bad-mouthing my classmates to me, oh, don't go near him, don't go near, and even talking about other teachers too, behind their backs. And I think it affected me socially too, because I started avoiding people that were probably really harmless. You know, they probably just didn't meet my mother's ridiculous standards that nobody could meet anyway. I mean, even those smart, perfect kids, if she got to know them a little more, probably within a week she'd find something wrong with them too. You know, it's just, and then there was a lot of talking to teachers behind my back too. I think a lot of my classmates started to avoid me because of my mother. You know, especially in the older grades, because she wasn't that nice to them. Like, she, you know, like I talked about in my other video, how she kind of has to, like, assert her authority, and kind of, she likes to put her dick on the table. And I used to see her yelling at my classmates in the hallway, like, just over stupid shit. You know, if someone was late to class, she'd be like, "You're late, get to class now." Meanwhile, the kid was 30 seconds late, and he was running for it. He knew he was late. He was like, he was darting for the door, and he knew he was late. He didn't need to get screamed at. You know, just stuff like that. And then she turns around, she's like, "Well, you're too quiet. You don't know how to talk to people. No wonder your classmates don't like." Meanwhile, she was sabotaging my relationship with my whole grade. And with teachers too, she would talk to them behind my back, you know, about my grades and a test I took. And I remember getting a lecture over one quiz. It wasn't even a major test. It was like a quiz that I got a C plus on, like a 78 or something. Like, and all my other grades were like A's. So she's got to pick this one like minor quiz where I got basically almost a B, but she still had to like pick it out and like emphasize it. And then she'd be the type of person too where, you know, she'd track everything I did, you know, grade wise, you know, test wise, quiz, homework wise, you know, well, why is whatever happened to that assignment? I heard from your teacher that she never got it. Where's that assignment? Or I saw you talking to such and such a person. You really shouldn't be associating with that person. And there was, I guess I said in my last video, any attempt of me trying to develop my own identity, my own life, she squashed it before it could ever even happen. But yeah, and she would say too, like, pick my grades apart. And if I ended up with like a B plus or an 89 average, she'd say things like, "Oh, well, if it wasn't for that one quiz you got a C plus on, you would have gotten an A. If you wouldn't have handed that one homework assignment in late, you would have gotten an A." Like, tracking every grade I did to like the decimal point and picking up like one mistake I might have made that made it a B plus and not an A. And that is abuse. I'm sorry. And she, you know, people, she's just like, "Oh, I'm such a good mother. I just wanted the best for you." And even outsiders that don't know how she really is would be like, "Oh, she means well, no," but that is it is abuse. I'm sorry. No child should have to go through that. And yeah, talking to teachers behind my back, and even, you know, talking to teachers about my classmates behind their backs. You know, someone walks by their teacher and sees them talking to my mother, one of the other teachers, about them. You know, that's not going to reflect well on me. They're going to avoid me like the plague. And then she turns to me and was like, why can't you make friends? Why doesn't this one like you? Meanwhile, I have a problem with somebody and it's my fault, but then a day later she's bashing that kid to me anyway. So it's like, what are you even doing? And as I said in the last video, there was a girl I was friends with in elementary school who was kind of a mutual friend now. Me and my husband, you know, she was friends with my husband, and then he started dating me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you know, this is who I'm dating now." And then he said he started talking to her about me, and she started saying something and then stopped. Like, he said it sounded like she was going to say something mean, but she didn't. And then he started pressing her, like, what is it, you know? And then she went into this whole story about, I don't remember what it was, like a nude magazine or something, like we were looking at in like 5th grade. And I don't even remember how this happened. I didn't know that it happened, because it happened behind my back, but I mentioned something to my mother in passing, like an innocent comment. I wasn't trying to get anybody in trouble. But I guess my mother took something I said and kind of put two and two together. It was something stupid, like a picture of like male private part. I don't even remember what it was. And this one, my mother went behind my back and called this girl's grandmother and got this girl in trouble, and this girl stopped speaking to me, and I didn't know what the hell happened. And one thing too I remember about this girl, I was friends with her, and then there was a third girl at the time that we were both kind of friends with, and it's fun. I kind of forgot about all this, but then this one story sort of like brought up a lot of memories. So there's this girl that we were both friends with, this third girl, and I remember my mother bashing the friend that got in trouble on the phone to somebody else's mother. So again, now that girl is going to want to avoid me. And speaking of that girl, this other girl, she and I were friends too, and she used to come over my house, and for some reason my mother really didn't like this girl. My mother was really nasty. This girl, this wasn't even behind her back, this was to her face, and we were like 9, 10. I remember one time, the girl came up to my house, she rang the bell, and she was standing, waiting by the door, and there was like a glass pane, window on the door. My mother started screaming at this girl that she was standing too close to the door, and her breath, I guess like steam from her breath was getting on the door, and she was screaming at my friend that she was ruining her door and that she needs to take a step back. So that's just one of it. There were other things too, and then trying to make this girl look bad to me by saying things like this girl is gonna, you're letting this girl push you around, you can't stick up for yourself. Again, like, she's always telling me what a wimp I am and that everyone's walking all over me. I need to be wary of this. I need to be nastier to this person's taking advantage of me. But looking back, and I've seen other videos on this too, that they try to convince you that people who are harmless are actually the ones with ulterior motives. So you push those people away, and it just isolates you further, and so they have more control of you, and there's no outsiders that could possibly intervene or point something out, or, because I think she's probably afraid that this girl might have said something to her mother. I don't know if she was afraid of this girl's mother, because this girl's mother was a little off too. So I don't know if my mother was afraid of her or what, but my mother did not like this girl. I mean, to stand there and yell at a 9-year-old girl over because she's standing too close to the door, because her breathing on the door is going to ruin the door. Again, it's like the silverware incident and the food coloring incident that I talked about in my first video. And then I remember too, I had a neighbor that, they were moved around a lot. They weren't living there that long, but this kid, he was about a year older than me, and they had a cat. And one Halloween, he was walking around trick-or-treating, and he was taking his cat with him. I don't know why he did this. I don't know why you would take a cat trick-or-treating, but anyway, he came to my door, and he was holding his cat. And my mother hates pets. Hates animals. So this kid is holding his cat, and the cat jumped out of his arms and walked into my living room. My mom was screaming at this kid. She's like, she didn't even say, get your cat out of my house. She said, get that thing out of here. Not just once, like 4 or 5 times. Get that thing out of here. Like yelling at me, yelling at my neighbor. So, you think that kid ever wanted to hang out with me? No. And just in general too, my mom with her whole uppity demeanor and snootiness, I think even if she didn't sabotage a friendship directly, I think it just put a lot of other parents off. Like they knew that she was judging them, and she was, because then she'd turn around to me and talk shit about my friend or their families, or one thing she loved to do is to rip on other mothers. And kind of like, not say she was better directly, but kind of imply that she was the best mother, and what's wrong with this woman, what's wrong with that woman, that kind of thing. And then, after like a lifetime of this, you do try to avoid certain people, because you think that you kind of assign bad ulterior motives to people that probably don't exist because you've been so brainwashed by someone that's trying to cut you off from society and from any meaningful relationships. So I think I avoided a lot of people that were probably harmless, or just because they don't fit in that 0.1 of 1% that my mom would consider an acceptable human being. I mean, basically, her standard is you have to be just like her, and nobody it really is, thank God. This could also be, too, why my father's been gone for 20 years and she hasn't dated at all. I think she'd find a problem with 99.9% of men and just, like, rip them apart. And then even to this day, you know, I've talked about extensively in my other videos how she's tried to sabotage my relationship with my husband, and even jobs. One time I was lifeguarding, I was on the phone with my supervisor, and she took the phone from me and started screaming at the guy. She almost got me fired. But then she's the type of person, too, that if I wasn't fired, but if I had been, she would have turned to me and said, "See, you don't know how to handle situations. You're socially inept. You don't know how to act." You know, so there's been a lot of that too, where she'll sabotage something or relationship and then turn it around on me like, "You don't do anything right." So I think that's another motive to why she did what she did. Just anything she can do to undermine my confidence, so I never left her or stayed dependent on her. And it just made me an easier target. And I think, too, when you tell anybody anything as a child about them, repeatedly, not just once, repeatedly, they start to believe it. Like, "Oh, you're a loner, you don't know how to make friends, I saw you sitting by yourself, you're such a mouse, you let people walk all over you, you're a wimp, you're that." So that, you think that's going to help me be more outgoing or more confident? No, it's just going to push me more into a corner. But I think she knew that, and that's why she did it. She did the same thing about my weight, and that might be a topic for another video, the whole weight thing. I mean, I've never been fat, but I've carried 10 or 15 extra pounds. You know, I think probably because of her and her fucking up my whole relationship with food. I had like this, I've never been fat, just like an extra freshman 15 kind of deal, but the way she talks about it, when I was 2 sizes bigger than I am now, you'd think I was 300 pounds, and I was never really a big girl, but she tells me, "Oh, well, she used to be heavy." And it's ironic, because she's always been around 200 pounds in her adult life, or 180 or something, and I've been max 150. I'm like 130 now, I've been up to 150, but so nowhere near her size, and I'm even a little taller than she is, so she's just a miserable, jealous bitch. That's all I could say. And she doesn't want me to have anyone in my life but her. Like I said, she even isolated my father, kind of turned his sisters against him, isolated him from his immediate family, and I kind of just want to make a video talking a little more about what she did to me in elementary school, getting the job at the school, and then kind of poisoning me against my classmates and vice versa, and sabotaging relationships behind my back. And just looking back to how she treated my classmates, or my friend with the door incident, and my neighbor, and anybody who gets off on treating children that way is a seriously disturbed individual. And you know, I didn't realize it at the time, but now, anyone who does that, you just don't believe anything they say, because it's a sign of a pathological human being. So, I don't know about my next video. I think maybe I'll talk about, since I started talking about my childhood, I'll talk about how I've started painting again recently, and how narcissists in childhood, they tend to like to shit all over your favorite hobbies, or just do something to ruin the event, so you always have a negative association in your mind, so you don't want to do something ever again, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that'll be a good topic for my next video, but until then, have a happy new year.